president of the California Business Roundtable, Rob Lapsley. Rob, we're just about 2 weeks out from the election results. Obviously, big changes. I'm assuming a lot of people have seen, this map in regards to votes for the red President-elect Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. We can go through Prop 36 in a moment as well, but I'm sure you're hearing the talk just like I am. Is there a shift? Is the soil shifting in California? I really want to focus on business and what it means for business. So when you look back at what took place a couple weeks ago, what's your greatest headline?
So I think the greatest headline is that the people of California have sent a clear message, maybe not just through the presidential election, because Trump's staying somewhat the same, but it's really what happened on the initiatives and the down-ticket legislative races. They've sent a clear message that they're fed up with cost of living, that they need to see the state become more affordable. They need to see changes in these policies that are ongoing where they feel helpless to be able to, the middle-class family, try and stay in California. And that's coming through very clearly. And the most important thing, Chris, is that it's one of California's most important communities. The communities that are going to be governing this state well into the future is the Latino community, given their population size here. And God bless them, right, for what they do here. And they have sent a clear message because the Latino vote has shifted. And I think they've sent a clear message that I don't think they're sending a message that the Democrat Party has a problem with them. I think they're sending a message that they have a problem with the Democrat Party.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to watch. I think it was San Diego County where the Latino vote actually, outpaced the votes for President Trump there. Many people surprised. What do you think is happening within the Latino community that we're seeing such a shift?
Well, we see right now, if you look at the legislative races, the Republicans have picked up a seat in the Senate. They've picked up 2 seats. They have flipped 2 Democrat districts so far in the Assembly. Nobody would have ever predicted that. And they were 2 Latino majority districts, long held by Latino Democrats. One of them, interestingly, and I think it's really worth mentioning, is in the AD 36 that was held by a gentleman by the name of Eduardo Garcia. It's Imperial and Riverside Valley. It's a border district. And that seat is now flipped from a very environmentally climate change active Latino, in many respects, leader to where we are today, to a Republican by the name of Gonzalez, who's going to win that seat. A complete flip on this.
Well, I think what's interesting too, just to speak to Imperial County, you can see here, hopefully people can see it on the screen, but 49-47 is how close it was for President Trump. And I don't know what it was in 2020, but it sounds like that is a major, major shift. And you saw that across much of the state.
So when you look at the previous results, for whatever that's worth, for on a statewide basis, in 16, voter turnout was at 75%, and Trump got 31.6% against Hillary Clinton. Wow. In 2020, turnout was at 80.1%, and Trump got 34.3%. Now we're going to be, it looks like we're going to finish up about 72%, 750,000 ballots left to count, and Trump's going to be in at over 38%.
That is just stunning. I want to jump into this because I think this is the one that many people are discussing, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing, Rob. I want to get your take on this. This is for Prop 36.
Yes.
And you can see here, overwhelmingly, almost 70%. But what I really want to point out are 2 things. One is, even in San Francisco County, 64% of the vote. You've got LA County, over 64% of the vote. And then no pun intended here, Rob, but to give you some props, this is actually the Public Policy Institute polling. You guys had it at 71% in early September. So you were spot on there. What do you take from these results?
So we're very grateful that the voters, paid attention to this. Obviously, we had a very clear idea of how they knew things needed to be fixed. The business community certainly is dealing with it every day. But, our team, we have a great team led by Tony Russo, our pollster, Mike Basilis, and Tony led this campaign. Business community joined with the DAs, the district attorneys, who really were the key lead in this, and law enforcement to fix this thing once and for all. And so the polling continued to be strong at about that. We had it 70 to 73% for over a year. And it is going to come in over 70% to finish. But, the key for us is that it sends a clear statewide message, because we won every single county. Chris, to your point, that's an excellent observation. Every single county in the state voted in favor of this. And obviously there's a reason why, but it also hopefully sends a clear message to the governor and the legislature, because we still need to do some implementing legislation on this in 25. And hopefully they're not going to play games with it, just as they tried to play games to keep this measure off the ballot back in July when you and I talked about this, and we beat the governor in the legislature, thanks to some of the Democrat members who joined with the Republicans to ensure that it was going to stay on the ballot.
Yeah, that's what I want to get is where are we going as a state? Because as you mentioned, the governor tried to take it off. He did many things to try to get rid of Prop 36, then to see it overwhelmingly get passed. But then right after the election, he calls for this special session to use a bunch of money to fight the new administration. So is there going to be some change for businesses here or not?
Well, that is absolutely the most important question for the statewide business community. Are we going to be squeezed in the middle between the governor's presidential ambitions and the reality of President Trump in Washington, and the business community potentially becomes collateral damage, right? Because if they're going to fight every decision that gets made, there's no telling what's going to happen. If they want to try and show Trump that the California way, which frankly people just rejected, but the California way is the way for the future that, Governor Newsom's going to run for president on, then that way most likely is going to be against business. Because if you look at a lot of his stuff, he signs all the bills for labor. And clearly being on the side of labor is one of his most important priorities to win a primary in the Democrat presidential race. So he's got, three priorities. One is labor, one is raising money from the entertainment community, and the other is raising money from the tech community. So those are his three priorities for 25 and 26. So where do these issues go versus Trump? Where do they go based on what is introduced in the legislature, what labor wants? It is going to be one of the busiest sessions that I think business has faced in many years in trying to navigate this and keep things in balance, so we have certainty and predictability to hopefully continue to grow or try and grow jobs here.
I'm curious, because I'm presuming you're going to try to bring it back in 26. Do you think if it would have been on the ballot, your Taxpayer Protection Act would have passed? So
our greatest disappointment for this year, on behalf, the business community, on behalf of all Californians, because that's what this was for, was to give them a voice, empower them to have the final say on all future taxes. It's a huge disappointment for us when the Supreme Court made such a politically biased decision. So we're looking at it. Let me share with you, I think that's important for all of your listeners. The labor community is gearing up to put the split roll property tax back on the ballot for next year. They've already been holding organizing meetings. This is the tax we defeated in 2020. That was Proposition 15, which was $13 billion a year, and changing Prop 13 for all commercial, retail, and industrial property in California. So they're coming back with that. And I think what we will see is, if they are intent on coming back with that to raise more money, again, hurt essentially the real estate community, then we're going to do whatever it takes on offense to ensure that the people of California are going to have a lot of choices and on tax measures in 26.
So you see insurance costs going up. What I'm hearing you say is, hey, Chris, if this were to go through the split roll property taxes, I'm not familiar with it, that were to pass, then you got property taxes going up. I mean, you're going to squeeze the NOI on these properties where no one's going to want to do anything in the state. So what is this exactly that you're referring to?
Well, it's one of the most important goals of the California Teachers Association and the Service Employees International Union and the Labor Fed. The minute that Proposition 13 passed in 1978, they have been committed to eliminating Proposition 13 for all property in California. They're saying that it has destroyed the funding for government services. It's destroyed the funding for schools. And California has never been the same since. Even though we have record property tax revenues, I mean, the whole argument that they have, it does not withstand any kind of factual scrutiny. So what they do, the strategy for them is to eliminate Prop 13, particularly for residential properties. They take a two-step strategy. And the first thing they do is they are trying to pass a change to Prop 13 solely for commercial, retail, and industrial property. Because if they can pass that on those properties, thinking that most homeowners think, oh, we won't pay that, then that changes, and then they will come back and try and change it on residential property. And so that was what we fought in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. They thought that was the best year to try and change it for, commercial. And we put together a campaign. We spent $75 million that year, thanks to, business leaders in this state. And we told the people of California very simply that if business is going to pay more, then you are ultimately going to pay more. And people got it. They got it. And that's the way it works. Small businesses, especially if they're a tenant and then they get their rates raised because of the property taxes, right? Then they pay more and they have to pass that cost on. We had an African-American barber who was one of our best spokespersons on TV across the state, clearly said it. He was from Sacramento. He was brilliant. And we got an incredible response. So we won that campaign, but it's coming back in 26.
Thank you for what you just said. I don't know if you remember the name Congressman Colin Peterson. He was the chair of the House Ag Committee, but he's a former CPA. He was on my show in my previous life, and he said, Chris, the one thing people don't realize is corporations don't pay taxes. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, they just pass it on to the consumer. They don't really pay these taxes. So thank you for how you just shared that.
Well, how else do they stay in business?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, you can't just eat increased costs, whether it's whether it's from litigation from employees or outside groups. I mean, as we know, you have to be able to stay in business, make a profit. And that means you have to put those costs into whatever product you're selling or providing.
Talk about some of the shifts that are taking place. I mean, a new DA in LA, if you want to go, city by city, great. Or if you want to just talk about California as a whole, that's fine too. But a new DA here in LA, which I think is going to be huge. You've got a new mayor in San Francisco, the mayor of Oakland recalled. I mean,
yes.
How do you interpret all of that?
We just see it as part and parcel of the voters' voice and clear message that, again, they wanted to see things change. So you combine Prop 36 with the recall on Gascon, right, with what happened in Alameda County on that. And the people have finally spoken. And they were silent for a long time, waiting to see if, that the legislators and the governor would fix this problem. And they didn't. And so they saw the opportunity to take things into their own hands. When they were provided that opportunity, they were crystal clear in where their perspectives were. And, we see this continuing, quite frankly. The most liberal or, district attorney now in the state is in Contra Costa County. Everybody else from San Francisco on down has been wiped out. So it'll be interesting to see what type of approach she takes. But thank goodness for the common sense that the voters of California have shown, because our state's now going to get back on track.
I'm curious, because I'm assuming you're talking to a lot of your the people that are part of the California Business Roundtable and business owners and executives. What are you hearing from them, like boots on the ground, post a couple Tuesdays ago?
So I'm hearing renewed optimism, particularly after the crime piece. I'm hearing, a lot of interest to see what this governor is going to do and what this legislature is going to do. And again, how that could potentially impact the business community and impact their long-term decision-making on growing jobs and investment in the state. Does it create more uncertainty, or does California take a step back, look at what this president does before, right? They just start filing lawsuits on everything else, and look at opportunities where we can work together, or not. I mean, so we got some big issues in front of us. If I could, when you look ahead, number one is the president. And again, we're not supporting his agenda per se. We're looking at how we create jobs in this state. That means we work with the state government, we work with the federal government, and we work with local government. And so, but you look at, for an example, like the issue on tariffs. So for California, if that's going to become a dominating issue for President Trump, look at the impact it means for us because of our ports. And not just imports, it's exports. When Trump was in office before, agricultural community got hit hard on the exports when they were dealing with the tariff issues. We have to try and protect ag in this state for what they represent and the jobs that they have. At the same time, look at how we don't hopefully get impacted through our ports and those jobs, and our logistics sector, which is the fastest growing sector now after healthcare for jobs, replacing manufacturing. I mean, so we start looking at all these pieces, and again, it's going to be a very challenging time on how we try and protect the interests of California, while at the same time make progress, what we need to do nationally as well.
There's no doubt that inflation, just the cost of living in California right now was a big talking point, really, I think, throughout the country, but specifically here in the state. Before we get into that, I do want to get your take, as well as, I don't know if you saw the recent interview with the owner of the LA Times, but
yes,
essentially wiped out the editorial board, said, hey, we are going to make some changes. Do you think the changes within the LA Times starts to also help this shift here in California, to help maybe just help people see things a little bit differently? I'll put it that way.
Well, that's a great question. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because we were shocked. I mean, after what we deal with, we just say, we look at the LA Times and, they're a good source of information. But when it comes to how they write those stories, or certainly the editorial board, we're just like, well, forget the LA Times, right? Because there's never going to be any balance from a business community perspective. And they're too, there was just, we just give up, as opposed to like the Daily News and those papers who take a completely different approach in a more balanced way on if a policy is good or bad. And the LA Times didn't do that. Now to see that they may create a balance is one of the best things that can happen for California, with all of the things that are coming that are so exciting. We got World Cup, we got the Olympics, we have everything that's going to generate billions of dollars in, the LA basin alone, not to mention for the state, and all the challenges facing between homeless, when you look at the minimum wage issue, all the things that could impact our ability to execute around these huge economic drivers. And they take a more balanced approach on some of these things, pro and con, could be one of the best things that for that LA basin could possibly happen. So we wish the owner well, but our perspective is it's long overdue, and we hope that they can get to a more balanced place in providing information.
It's going to be fascinating to see the impact that has just on the mindset here within California. I think another interesting talking point that I didn't even think about until you just brought it up, but was minimum wage, and the state voted down raising the minimum wage.
Yes. It's one of the most important. So you got some key messages coming out of Obviously, the election again, one, defeated rent control for the third time. So Mr. Weinstein went down in flames. Same thing, what we projected in the polling, 60% against, 40% for. Exactly the same result from the other two elections. So people clearly get it on rent control. They don't support it. They know it's going to impact future housing. That's number one. Number two, what we had for certainly minimum wage, because the fight in LA is already around $25 an hour, and they want 30 from the labor unions. And they're doing it to leverage the World Cup that's coming, to leverage the Olympics. It's $30 in 2030 is where they're headed. And obviously, you know where the economy is, you know where the hotel sector alone, right? And what they can and can't do. And so the people said, if they're not even going to support $18 an hour, they get the fact, again, businesses' costs go up, then they pay more. Look what happened with, this whole effort around fast food. People saw the prices go up, right? They had to go up to pay it. And people are, again, I think they're frustrated with their overall cost of living with that. So that's another, I think, very important message that we can use in our favor. And the last one was Prop 5. So changing the voter thresholds for Prop 13 when it came to bonds for affordable housing and infrastructure projects. Two worthwhile goals. But people understood, and even a lot of money wasn't spent to oppose it. Howard Jarvis led the effort. People understood, again, that if you're changing Prop 13, probably the only thing that's going to come out of that is bad. And so they voted that down as well. So three big messages here on election night with just those measures.
Man, it just seems like there's a definite shift taking place. Let's talk about what happened a couple days after the election. I believe it's called CARB is the committee, and what's happening there with the potential increase in gas prices. Again, the cost of living is what's having everyone leave the state. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But then this CARB meeting takes place. What actually took place, and what is it going to mean for the average Californian?
So the reality, again, of Californians voting the way they did happened on Tuesday, November 5th. On November 8th, the California Air Resources Board met in Riverside County at their building to make a final decision on what was called the low carbon fuel standard, one of the centerpiece regulations around our climate change goals to be able to achieve the reductions in greenhouse gas. And this new regulation ultimately is in order to achieve the reductions in carbon intensity that this regulation is mandating. To get there, it's ultimately going to, again, cost the oil companies billions of dollars, which will result in gasoline prices per gallon going up over the next 18 months or so, about 65 cents. So not only did they not hear the message that the people of California sent, not only are they unwilling to recognize the cost of living in California and how unaffordable we are, they basically sent a message that they just don't care. And the governor is supporting them on this. Legislature, the speaker, pro tem, are supporting on this. And as a result, you're going to see gas prices go up. We pay $1.22 a gallon per gallon of taxes in California. Nobody else pays that. Now, on top of that $1.22, you're going to get 65 cents ultimately. So now we're going to be at almost $2 a gallon in fees and taxes for every gallon sold that no other state's going to have. Now, if I could just real quickly add one thing on top of that. In September, the legislature went back into special session and passed a bill that the governor wanted that mandated California has to create a reserve supply of 15% of its fuel so that we eliminate quote unquote price spikes. Well, that means we got to put somewhere 550 million gallons of fuel. That's going to require at least 30 new huge oil tanks at a minimum. Last time I checked, no community wanted one of those tanks in their community. In addition, it's going to increase prices further because you're going to start limiting supply. So, and it will limit supply for Nevada and Arizona. So those governors are going crazy. So that's going to be another 15 cents. So now we're at $2 in fees and taxes per gallon when we're the most unaffordable state in the country.
It's just shocking to hear you lay it out. What I'm really curious to see, because I think President Trump is going to do what he said, and that's drill, baby, drill. I think he's going to really flood the market with supply, which will lower the cost of oil, and how that ends up sort of evening out. I think the sad thing for Californians is, the main driver of inflation is obviously the cost of energy. And I don't know, it's going to be shocking to watch. You're going to say something, Rob?
Yeah, no, it's just your point's so well taken. But California is an island when it comes to supply. If we don't get it from California, which, as you know, that's all been shut down too. So our actual, supply, homegrown supply here is virtually, dwindling down to zero. So, because they won't allow any new permits. So that means we have to import the fuel that they refine to be able to supply the state and supply Nevada and Arizona. That comes in by tanker from the Middle East. So think about the greenhouse gas that's expended there. But again, to your point, as these regulations kick in, all it does is increase the cost. We have to ensure we can maintain a supply, right? As hopefully it still comes in from the Middle East and that doesn't get disrupted. Or with us being an island, the rest of the country will pay $2.50 and we'll be at $5 minimum.
Gosh. All right. I want to share one other thing here. This is a tweet from Senator Scott Wiener. And he says, and I think this is important for people to realize, like, you start taking away power from politicians, that will wake them up. And when you see all these people leaving California because of the housing prices and cost of living, you're looking at potentially loss of, maybe 4 or 5 congressional seats for California, which is not going to be good for the state and the politicians of power. So even Senator Scott Wiener is like, hey, look, we got to start building more homes. We got to start making the state more affordable. I don't know Senator Scott Wiener like you do, Rob. So what's your assessment of this tweet and what does this mean for the next few years potentially?
Well, again, we welcome any member who starts to be able to be an advocate and vocal about the real solution to California's housing costs. And it is supply. It's eliminating the red tape, with local governments. It's streamlining what we have to do. Arguably, Chris, we need to bring back redevelopment. Eliminating redevelopment for California cities has hurt affordable housing greater than anything else that's been done. We need to bring it back. That's something that's under discussion. But we hope Mr. Wiener he's very influential. He brings many of his colleagues with him to be able to do what's necessary to be able to, change the laws and the regulations that will help increase the supply. So this will be a telling year. And it's not just this. There's many other issues like that for California.
Well, yeah, and I think the difficult thing for some people to realize is that, okay, he might say, hey, let's bring in more supply, but then it's not like I wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden I've got 100,000 new multifamily in place, right? I mean, it takes years to get those things built. So we'll see how that plays out. So Rob, as always, I really appreciate the insight, the time. I want to give you the last word. Anything else you want to add or share that we haven't talked about?
No, again, appreciate the opportunity to provide, some of the information for people to make informed decisions for their companies, for their investments. If business now does not stick together, in these next 2 years, we're going to have an even more difficult challenge. And at the end of the day, the thing that really matters for business, housing, all of the challenges California faces is who's the next governor. And that is coming quickly. And that has got to be the most important piece of the business agenda over the next 2 years.
You bring up a great point, because I think there's a possibility. I mean, the LA Times changing, you look at the election results, like there's a possibility for a shift in 2026. So for people that want to get involved and reach out to you and say, hey, how can I support us as a business community to really make California golden again? How can they do that?
Yeah, we are here. We'd be happy to provide any kind of information that anybody needs. We are going to be working very hard to help elect a pro-business governor in the state. We don't care who it is or where they come from or what party they are. I mean, logic dictates that it's going to be a Democrat governor, which is fine, as long as that they understand the business community and hopefully, just like what we talked about with the LA Times, are ready to try and balance these policies. And it's not a labor-driven agenda, which is what stifled a lot of the pieces around housing and job growth. That's going to be the real paradigm shift if we can get a governor like that elected. Then California, there's no telling what we can't do in the future to bring people back.
Very well said. If you want to find out more, go to cbrt.org and cbrt.org. Rob Lapsley, president of the California Business Roundtable. Appreciate it. We'll do this again soon. Okay, my friend?
Thank you, Chris. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.